Okay, well, let me make sure I understand what your actual position is before I ask
Hmm.
for elaboration. So, in a free society, where the judges are ruling according to standard precepts that we would, they wouldn't necessarily say, "Hey, I'm a libertarian," but like we as libertarian theorists, would look at that society and say, "Ah, yes, this is largely in accord with libertarian philosophy." Let's say.
Hmm.
Do you, so. Number one, do you think that there would be a system of law enforcement that uses the threat of violence? Because I really, like, for I know you're a pacifist. I mean, so I'm a pacifist, but
Yeah.
so, like, in other words, someone robs a bank. Do you think armed people can go and take them down and put them in a cage? I'm just trying to, like, see where you're coming from
Yeah.
first. I don't want
So
to assume anything.
I wouldn't necessarily categorize myself as a pacifist, and
Okay.
I've definitely heard your arguments concerning that. Um, I've done my own research into the way that violent crime is dealt with in our own society.
Mhm.
We use things like prison, we use harsh sentencing, we've got this concept of tough on crime.
Mhm.
And what the data shows is that there's really no deterrent effect, doesn't have a positive effect on recidivism rates and things like that.
Mhm.
So, what I have read, though, is that tort law does have a deterrent effect. And so, even though, our moral outrage about rape, or even abortion might lead us to, well, you need to have the book thrown at you and, throw you in a cell and lock away the key and all of that. The question really needs to be asked is what's going to produce the deterrence? And the tough on crime mode of enforcement doesn't actually do that. So in that case, my position is much more of a tort position.
Mhm.
And I guess I can also say this. I also believe, I mean, obviously, if we are saying that the fetus has rights from the moment conception is complete, that would make abortion also illegal. And so one of the modes of restitution, shall we say, that I think is possible and viable in the case of an abortive woman is the concept of restorative justice. The Free the People did a little documentary on that concept. Obviously, I don't think that the state should do restorative justice because it can get draconian, but I think it's perfectly viable in an anarchic society. So, yeah, when it comes to something like rape, I think tort is the way to go, and when it comes to abortion, I think restorative justice is the way to go.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you, because yeah, you anticipate where I was going. I wanted to first of all start with something that most people recognize as an obvious crime, like someone robbing a bank with a gun, and then we say,
Yeah.
okay, if anybody's going to prison, it's that kind of a person, or
Hmm.
a serial killer, what have you. And then I was going to try to. Because before, when you said, well, who's using the force against a woman who's considering getting an abortion, the obvious pro-choice or even Walter Blockian evictionism response is going to be, well, whatever, if you, Carrie, are saying you don't think abortion should be legal, then whatever's mechanism the justice system uses or the legal system uses
Yeah.
to restrain criminals, that's what we're talking about. And, unless you're a pacifist, they have guns and cages. And so what do you
Right.
mean? So that's why I realized as I was about to ask you that I wasn't actually sure what you thought should happen to a woman who is found to have had an abortion. If you're saying you don't think technically that should be legal the way that opening up a pizza shop is legal, that you think there'd be
Right.
different legal responses to those actions.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I would say, the conventional debate centers around the question of whether legal enforcement will actually mitigate or prevent the practice of abortion. And so that's where things get pretty muddy, because now we're talking about human action and
Mhm.
the reason why women seek out abortion services to begin with. And predominantly, the reason why women seek out abortion services are because of poverty and bad relationships. Usually some sort of abusive or toxic relationship. And so when it comes to answering the question, how do we actually end the practice of abortion? That's where I start to get more into the economics of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see the pro-choice and pro-life side really more as a division of labor, where the pro-choice side is motivated to find products and services that will prevent unwanted pregnancies, and the pro-life side is trying to find products and services that respond, that are a life-affirming response to unwanted pregnancy when it occurs. And so, that's really that side of it, the economic side of it, is really what's going to deal with, as far as women are concerned, their choice,
Mm-hmm.
right? Their choice to take a pill or not, or their choice to go to an abortionist or not. That all comes down to economic factors. The enforcement thing doesn't actually, like I said before, it doesn't actually produce a deterrence. I mean, even the Texas law right now that was passed, which is interesting since they took the civil route instead of the criminal route. But we have reports here in New Mexico that women are, crossing over the state border to have abortions here.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason to believe that criminalization wouldn't create a black market, especially if the mode of enforcement is much more authoritarian, tough on crime sort of things. And so, to come back to, well, what do you do when in an anarchic situation, that I'm conceptualizing here, where a woman, breaks the law and has an abortion? The reason why I like the restorative justice model is because that model is already prepped with helping that woman figure out how to not get herself in that position again, right? So, it might be teaching her something about, money and budgeting so that she can get out of poverty. It might be something about teaching her how to identify toxic relationships so that she doesn't re-enter another abusive relationship. That restorative justice model is not only giving her the tools to keep herself out of that position, but it's helping her realize why that decision was a bad decision to begin with. And in that model, there's less of an incentive for the perpetrator, if you will, to avoid or try to do everything in their power to get away with what they did. They're incentivized to embrace the fact that they screwed up, and that there's a way forward and a way out of it. And again, the restorative justice model, if you watch the documentary that Free the People did, they found a huge, they have found that the recidivism rates for those crimes that they do restorative justice for drop drastically. So if we're talking about ending the practice of abortion, there's an economic element to it, but there's also this element in restorative justice where we actually reduce recidivism. I don't see how using a tough on crime model will actually resolve that problem. It just incentivizes trying to work around and get around it.
So is this correct, Carrie? You're actually not necessarily, advocating that armed law enforcers go around hunting down women who have had abortions and using punitive measures against them, but you're not comfortable with, like, Walter Block and other conventional pro-choice libertarians and their discussion of the property rights and philosophy behind what may be a society that actually doesn't throw the book at a woman who's had an abortion. So you just want to clarify philosophically and ethically and the conceptual framework, but actually in practice, there might not be that huge of a difference between the way society unfolds in your vision versus like Murray Rothbard's.
Yeah. So I think number one, I have actually heard pro-life figureheads like the one I'm thinking of right now is his name is Scott Klusendorf, and he's explicitly said that a war on abortion would look like the war on drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And I have never had an abortion. I can't imagine ever seeking an abortion, but that scares the hell out of me
Mm-hmm.
because we have seen
I
how
thought
the
you were going to
war
say,
on
but I have had drugs, and let me tell you, no.
Yeah, we've seen with the war on drugs how how easy it is to go after innocent people, violate their rights, and then just be like, "Oops, sorry, my
Mm-hmm.
bad." Um, and I think it's really important for pro-lifers, especially, to understand what it is that they are saying when they want to use these authoritarian modes of enforcement in order to prevent a woman from having an abortion. And I think honestly, this whole situation with COVID-19 has created the perfect analogy because when the object of state interest resides or potentially resides inside of you, your body, then suddenly you disappear.
Mm-hmm.
Your rights disappear. Like you become completely secondary. And so, I do think in the situation that I am imagining, you would definitely have, abortion would be illegal. It would be equivalent to murder,
Mm-hmm.
right? It would be murder. How we enforce that, right? You have the legal rights side of the philosophy, but then you have the legal enforcement side of the philosophy. And I am definitely opposed to the authoritarian enforcement of abortion prohibition. I think that there are better ways to go about doing that. And I want to take seriously the economic side of the whole question when it comes to how do we actually end the practice of abortion.